Jamie. Oh, sugar. Let's turn that off. Safe word. I've already made a faux pas. I revealed some of the whiteboard sketches. Can't do that.
I mean, episode 131, Stephen, we weren't 2 seconds in, and Kurt's cussing, and he's like all mixed up, and he's like, where's that editor? Like, this is all going to be cut in post. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So.
Which yeah. 131 was a rusty maneuver. So I'll start off by saying I'm off my game because the AIA Michigan Fellows Committee asked me to submit for fellowship, and I've spent the past, I don't even know how many months. Jamie could probably tell you when it got bad, but it's been pretty hectic. It's done now. Last week was I'm sure you're aware because they put it on the same. I assume you probably submitted a speaking session.
Yes,
because you're typically you're on top of that a lot better than I am. But they put it on the same day that the fellows application was due, and I was like, there's no way I'm going to add that level of work. But so that's over with.
I would have divorced you at that point. This would have been a divorce if you did that.
Yeah, my clients would have divorced me as well. Mm-hmm. Although Brad Benjamin, our old YAF fellow,
yes,
not fellow, but friend fellow, he emailed me on Thursday, the due date, and asked me to join a presentation that they were putting together for startup firms, like new firm startups. So at the end of the day, I still got involved in an application to a presentation session. So we'll see.
You couldn't get out of it.
But I didn't really have to do any work either. So.
Oh, even better.
Yeah. So Stephen, for those that are in the live, which I don't see a lot of activity on that side of the coin yet, Stephen Parker is with us. Our old AIA, YAF, NAC. Well, no, not NAC for me, but I know you've been involved with NAC and other stages of the career path in AIA, but is joining us. So we'll do a more formal introduction when we kind of do our actual intro. But if anybody's watching the live stream, and they wonder who's that extra person in the room.
Yeah, and also, Stephen, like if you're wondering like why Kurt like really kind of like is always like looking like this the whole time, he moved his camera like recently, and so he's still getting used to the whole desk setup. So don't take it as like he's like looking for messages,
looking for some
I need a signal. Yeah.
I was not going to make any Space Cadet jokes or anything at all. It's totally fine.
Well, I got to get reacquainted with my camera. So.
Kurt, this is a podcast. This is our podcast. We've been doing this for a while now.
Say what now? I got your picture there, Stephen. So it's
okay. Yeah, I thought that might be a good segue of like, what are these sketches for? That's a paid herb we use.
I'm also reading email. Doing.
Is this his catch up time? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So okay. No, I was reading Stephen's email. He sent me more work to do. Oh, nice. Okay.
So I think you said it like a minute ago, but so where are you in the? This is like one of those like Carmen Sandiego kind of things. Like where in the world are you?
Yeah, so I'm in Chicago.
Okay.
For a behavioral health business conference called Invest, and I'm here just to pick up an award and.
No big deal. Just pick up an award, right? Like
only my mom cares, honestly. So.
Do you send them to her? Does she have a shelf?
Newspaper clippings is kind of her forte.
Yes.
I think.
Yeah, my mom for a long time, like when I found architecture, that was her thing. She was just like, okay, that means I'm going to cut out every article related to architecture. But she wouldn't send them to me. Like at college, she would put them in a manila folder, and like when I would come back at the holidays or whatever, there would be like a good stack. I felt like there was going to be a quiz.
Oh, like there's a pop quiz involved.
Yeah.
Where's the Scantron sheet?
Like,
give me some test anxiety.
Did you read all these articles, Mom, or did it just yeah? So.
Scantrons. I don't know. I think you're aware that I teach at Lawrence Tech. I have not.
Professor.
Professor of practice. Yes, I have not deployed. It's really just a term, just like I collect this award. I collect these terms and titles and whatever. I have not deployed a Scantron. I honestly don't think these kiddos would know what to do with it.
Well,
I have used I have deployed Scantron when I did teach. I can say that I have checked that one off my have done it list.
You've checked off the Scantron?
No, just the yeah.
I think the Europeans and other parts of the world that don't use standardized testing that way would look at our Scantron sheets in slight disbelief.
Oh, so
that's a whole interesting topic of
here's a good one. I know we're about to go out of the green room, but so one of our other guests, Jason, was Jason our first other than family? Like Jason's kind of family to me. But
my brother was our first guest because he was our musical curator, and then Jason was our first non-blood relative.
Gotcha. So anyhow, Jason teaches, and he's a professor of history and music and culture. But he was saying that he would, like, I saw him at dinner one night recently, and he was like, "Yeah, I just came back from doing some exams, and we had to use the blue book, like, because they've gone to the blue book now to counteract like ChatGPT and AI creating essay answers for students in exam settings."
I'm trying to remember last time I saw a blue book.
Exactly.
Like an IB exam or something, or an AP exam, like
right.
High school.
Yep.
That's triggering.
I was just like, what? It was like I had to have him repeat it, like, because I was like, did I miss a part of this phrase story? Yeah.
Wow.
That's interesting. We've talked about, Jamie and I have talked about this AI stuff, and at school, our architecture history professor is like he's the most freaked out about ChatGPT because he, and then the dean is like using Midjourney to like ask the students to like generate concepts in Midjourney, the dean, right? And then the history, who's the associate dean, is the history guy. He's like trying to ban ChatGPT, and I'm sitting here in this conversation with everybody, all the faculty. I'm like, there's no way in hell that's ever gonna work, because it's coming, right? Like it's already here, I suppose.
I think I heard it, and just for context, I'm also presenting a mental health mock-up workshop that uses mock-ups and AI, like cardboard mock-ups that we do when we do design processes for large mental health facilities, and AI. So like they take a picture of the mock-up and then provides like inspirational generative imagery to help them like foster creativity and help make design decisions more efficiently, to blend the analog and the latest digital tool.
That's cool.
Do that in November. So
yeah.
Well, we'll have to maybe that'll come back when we talk about the sketches.
So is that your segue, Kurt? Are we going to go?
The soft segue. Yeah, yeah.
Are we ready?
I'm all teed up over here, so I've got buttons.
Exit the green room.
Yes, come join us in the show.
All right.
Hey, Jamie. Hey, Stephen. Welcome.
Hey, Kurt. Good to see you. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, well, you know.
Yeah.
I say yes to too many things.
Mm-hmm.
And
all good.
Maybe I don't say no very much.
The art of saying no.
Yeah, I'm working on that.
Like
somebody asked me a question.
Hey, I got a podcast. Hey, I got a podcast. Yeah.
Sound.
All right.
Emphasis on the sound.
So Stephen, yes, welcome. And I apologize for my non sequitur banter there for Kurt, but I had to rib him a little bit because this is episode 132, everybody. And hopefully 131 gets out in the real world before then.
It exists.
Because it exists. It's in the can.
It's in the
Technical
can.
Term, it's in the can.
We once, Stephen, I don't know if you ever listened to the past episodes, but there was one that did get lost.
Yes, there was one. And honestly, there was a text exchange this week where I almost invoked that because I was like, do I want to ask? Like, is that why Kurt's been sort of ghosting me a little bit? Like, did he lose it?
The shame face.
Because 131 was a rough episode. I mean, there was a lot of rough parts in that one. So,
well, we got past it. Yeah. I'm happy for you both.
Yeah, thank you. You're welcome. Thank you for indulging me for that moment. So I appreciate it.
Before should we do the introduction of Stephen before we talk about coffee a little bit? And just so I won't really, I don't even want to try because Stephen does a lot of things that I probably don't even know about, but I do know one thing, that he's an architect that we know based out of the DC area. If I got that right. I mean, your email says Arlington, but that's like the DC outpost for the old Stantec. Is that how that
I live in Arlington, Virginia, and I work in the DC area. We have multiple offices in the Washington DC area. So.
Oh wow! See, already missing the window on that one. But Jamie and I know Stephen from our days on the Young Architects Forum for AIA National, and we've been dying to get him on the podcast. And I want Stephen to then add a little bit more about what he does, because it's going to lead into the sketches that we talk about, which is really exciting. So Stephen, please flesh out this generous presentation that I've already opened up.
And I'm gonna before you flesh it out, I am gonna go back to what we did do in the green room. Hopefully, it makes the technical cut. Can't trust it these days, so I'm doing it again. So, Carmen Sandiego. So, where in the world are you today?
I am in Chicago, Illinois, for a behavioral health business conference called Invest, to accept an award and meet some people. So.
Awesome. Yeah, because I know that you do travel a lot, and I know your family gets to travel with you as well at times too. So that's awesome. But yes, please, as Kurt said, kind of give us a little bit of who Stephen is and what you're doing with your. I mean, what sort of brings you to the podcast in a sense, because you've got some interesting takes on sketches in your own work.
And where all the trophies go from these awards.
Yeah. They're at Mom's house. We know. Yeah.
Yeah. So Stephen Parker, I am an architect and behavioral health planner. So I'm oriented around the planning and design of mental health and behavioral health facilities across North America and beyond. So that's anything from acute inpatient psychiatric hospitals to addiction treatment and autism spectrum disorder clinics, from the Canadian Arctic to Australasia. And I get to do that with Stantec as part of their behavioral health practice. And I get to have a lot of fun doing it, helping a lot of communities in crisis and individuals in recovery and design for humanity at its most vulnerable. And I wear a couple of different hats with a couple of different organizations, if you would like to know them.
Yeah.
I am the design chair for the DC Building Industry Association. So it's a association in DC, do their community improvement day. It's a pro bono project every year. I sit as an associate director for the Design of Mental Health Network, headquartered in the UK. So it's a network of designers, facility operators, and those with lived experience and vendors oriented around promoting design in mental health environments. I'm a founding member of the Center for Healthcare Design's Behavioral Mental Health Environment Network, and I sit on as a U.S. representative appointed by the AIA to the International Union of Architects Public Health Group. And I think that is it in terms of official roles.
See, I'm glad you did that because, yeah, I did not do enough homework on your resume to to pull that off.
No one
That's
should.
great.
I honestly shouldn't either. So
the one thing I was thinking about, given our Jamie and I know you well, see you on social media in different countries, different cities. I figured out how you do all these things is that you don't use any hours of the day to sleep. Unless you're probably captive on an airplane, you might be sleeping then if you can possibly pull it off. But I don't.
So you are officially our target audience. Like you, caffeine, coffee. So what is the coffee of choice for Stephen these days?
So after doing some pro bono projects in India and Kenya, I got really into chai, more so. And they have slightly different ways of going about it in those two countries that you might consider more of a chai latte kind of thing, like the addition of milk. So is there a reverb?
There was a second, but I think it's just your hand. It's the talking with the hands. I do it too.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay. And then don't worry about technical. I think it gets fixed once the audio comes through. So anyway.
Yeah. So working on these pro bono projects in India and China, I get more into chai. And in India, that seems to be a chai with cardamom and milk. But in Kenya, when I was there, master planning a mission hospital, it's much more milk and much less tea. And it's more about the sweetness of the milk. And so if you pay your farmer well and they feed the cow really well, then you get sweeter milk. And they rate the influence of the hospital department based on how good your chai is.
I like that metric. That's an interesting data point there.
Is there an infographic for that? Because that just sounds really important.
I would say that if your chai room is well stocked with good biscuits, which is cookies, and the sweeter your chai, because that's the sweeter your milk, and like the good sort of mix, that's kind of how they, you know.
Yeah, I was born in the Commonwealth, so yeah, I know the biscuit. Yep, gotcha.
Yep. There you go.
Yes, it's good to know how to name a cookie in different parts of the world. You know, you don't want to wind up with a dry piece.
I think it was colonialism, but it's all right. We're talking about biscuits. So,
it's all just tea and crumpets and
yeah.
Well, that's it. You know, so chai itself is actually tea, right? It's tea,
it's
right?
Tea. Chai means tea. But the milk sort of infusion and there's different cultural and regional like differences for it. You know, it's got a little bit more spice to it, depending on like how it's configured. In the same way that if you were to go back home in South Carolina, where I'm from, your sweet tea, which is different family to family. So some has viscosity given its sugar content. In my home, it's mint that we put in our sweet tea in the summer because it makes it a little bit more fresh and a little bit less sugar, which makes my wife happy. The same thing in like different households that had chai. It's like they were really proud about how sweet the milk was like the big differentiator.
Good stuff. Yeah. So, Kurt, what about yourself there, buddy?
I am moved into an old standby from our friends at Rootless Coffee in
Better not be the light bright.
No, they're dark. It's called dark. They're dark roast. It's got a raven on it. It's
very Edgar Allan
It cannot
Poe.
be confused for anything but a dark roast coffee. And so it's a good one. You know, I haven't actually had it in a while, so it's a good one. The light bright is gone, no longer. So that was the flavor du jour of the last episode. So
sounds light and bright.
It is good. It's also very good. You'll have to. Well, once that episode posts, you'll find out. as before I get harassed by Jamie some more. But what about you, Jamie? What's in your Coffee Sketch podcast mug?
I am in my Coffee Sketch podcast mug, also enjoying the Coffee Sketch podcast coffee. So cheers to that.
Shameless plug down below if you're watching the video.
On brand.
Yeah, totally on brand tonight. Yeah, it's the end of the pot, so you know. But that I have to say that I was, you know, it has most times when you see like a tasting note for like a coffee or something like that, they'll always talk about like the dark chocolate. It has dark chocolate notes or like hazelnut chocolate, you know, or something like that. This one like went right to the milk chocolate. So I wasn't sure if I had ever had one that sort of was on the milk chocolate, like, you know, like door. And I really like it. It is a medium roast. But it really, you know, it's really good and smooth. It's just a really smooth blend. And I'm a fan. You know, not just because it's ours, but it's like I was skeptical when Kurt was like reading and sniffing the bag and stuff, and before I had tasted it. And
well, there are just times in your life you really want chocolate, like, and only chocolate will suffice.
Right. So.
Yeah,
there you go.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Right, Jamie. So that is, you know, well, I was going to say, but I have to put an asterisk on.
Is this where you go into your feud?
Into my which? A family feud? No, the.
He doesn't even know, Stephen. So I'm gonna like Kurt. Take a listen for a second. Like, you can just like take a pause. I know it's been a rough couple weeks. So, Stephen, Kurt inadvertently maybe like got himself into a feud with another podcast. And
it's a friendly feud.
It's a friendly one, you know. But he kind of walked himself into it, and it's all about coffee. It's all about our coffee, in fact.
Okay. Something's been brewing between you two?
No, not me. I'm not part of this feud.
I got us into a tip.
Us? There's no us.
I need backup.
Don't let me into this.
I backup. Well, what? Yeah, it's our friends at ArchiSpeak podcast. Cormac Phelan is. He's been shooting across the bow over here on a gift bag. He doesn't, you know, he lives in Michigan now and he doesn't even want it. I've been trying to give him coffee.
I told you.
This guy is so belligerent. He won't even take it. I invite him to my crits in my studio. And this guy.
So Stephen, like, this is, if you have, and I know you have listened to it, but there are moments in our podcast where we will definitely go into the pop culture references. And so there was a moment with So Archispeak has been around for 10 plus years now as a podcast. They're like the OGs. And Cormac like is an incredible sketcher. So we were out in San Francisco, which I know we're going to talk about with you in a moment. But we were having dinner one night, and they're like, guys, we got like a 300th episode kind of coming up on the horizon. They're like, wouldn't it be fun if we just had you guys on? And we're just like, what? That's awesome.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So anyhow, we did that. And then we made a big deal about our coffee with them. And Kurt was like, oh yeah, I'll bring you over some and da da da. And he's never brought Cormac coffee. So my pop culture reference for all this is there's going to be like a say anything moment where like Kurt shows up at Cormac's house with a big bag of coffee over his head. And I just hope there's someone there to capture it. So that's just.
Okay. No, that sounds like a very like photo worthy moment that needs to occur sometime.
Yep.
It needs to be a ridiculously sized bag of coffee.
Yes. Yes.
Like it needs to be difficult to lift. It has to have some extravagance to the gesture, I feel like.
Well, and the best part is not only is there a say anything reference in all this, but Cormac lives in Grosse Pointe. So there's a Grosse Pointe like connection to all this too.
John Cusack, degrees of how many degrees of separation?
I mean, and there's an actor's strike right now, so you probably could get John Cusack to do this for you.
Well, as long as he doesn't have to read a script.
No, we don't have a script. There's no script.
Just a soundtrack.
Yeah. Cheers.
There you go.
Oh man, that's a good one. Well, anyway, it's friendly fire. We're just having poking fun. And we'll see how long this goes because, like I said, I've tried to deliver.
Well,
it's now being refused.
Pop culture reference for a movie that came out the year I was born. So,
Oh yeah, that's true. Steven is a little bit younger than both of us, right? So,
but quite the sketcher.
But we don't hold. We're not ageist over here, so we don't hold that against.
As long as we're all sketchy, right?
That's right.
Sketchy together.
Yeah.
So should we turn on the screen and take a look at some sketches? Steven's got an interesting story, I think, of some of these, and we'll see. I'll zoom in and out as we need to, but I wanted to park the your logo that you have developed for your presentations, right?
Yeah. So happy to break it down. Drawn Out is our mental health sketch workshop. So and by we I say Shahad Sadek and Emily Schickner, and usually another collaborator, either another behavioral health planner or a clinician or someone local that I think can kind of add to the conversation that we have in that workshop. So Drawn Out, and the idea about Drawn Out in the title there is that you're drawing out a very difficult subject, and you're using the medium of sketching to do it around mental health. Since that's the focus of my practice, and I like to pose that we have a practice of purpose. Drawn Out is intended to defy stigma by design. So this workshop is based around a panel discussion with Shahad, who, as an architectural designer, was admitted for professional burnout to a facility in Texas, actually. And as part of her process, she sketched the psychiatric facility she was admitted to. And her story and the kind of stories we have for us on the panel becomes a foil to talk about mental health design strategies that any practitioner, no matter what type of design you do with healthcare, mental health, schools, housing, anything, how you can translate mental health design concepts into those spaces to improve mental well-being. And part of that exercise is have that panel discussion, go back and forth and talk about it, use precedents and case studies and evidence-based design sort of research to talk about it and unpack her experience, her story, and we relate our own as well. Having had a father admitted to a psychiatric facility twice, second time the week my son was born, and using it to defy stigma through that process and that story. We go through an empathy exercise. So we give a patient persona, someone else who's not you or me or Shahad or someone, to overcome and kind of identify bias and put them in the framework of someone going through this experience, and then pairing people off together in this workshop. Because we feel that it's good to have a sounding board between you and someone else to have a conversation when you go through that empathy exercise. And then together you sketch a visitation suite, which is the only place the public gets to see in mental health facilities. If you're not a patient or a provider, and we ask them through that empathy exercise, what does this person feel, see, hear, and how can this space foster a social connection and for an individual in crisis and a family member who's trying to like build on that relationship to help them through that. And it's a great way we have kind of three pillars to that. So one is to elevate the conversation around mental health design. The other is to educate designers on mental health and well-being in the design process. And then is to advocate by design, using the medium of sketching to really tackle this difficult subject, but also hopefully they can advocate in their practices when they use those skill sets and that knowledge they hopefully gain from the experience, but also in their communities when mental health issues come up, they can be an advocate for policy and change, and however that may manifest.
So with this workshop that you've done in a variety of different settings now, is primarily the audience other architects and sort of design professionals, or is it a little bit more of a broad base in some of the other conferences that you've been doing this?
So we've been primarily focused on architects and designers for the time being. We've had 3 iterations so far, and we'll do our 4th one coming up in November at Engage in Colorado at Keystone. We just did this workshop at Aspire in Asheville, and then before that at A23 in San Francisco, and the first time at Architecture Exchange East in Richmond. We've been primarily focused there because that's just kind of the comfort level of, individuals with the sketching capability,
Sure.
And trying to educate those folks on mental health design considerations. But we've had other members of the public interested in hosting us, both mental health professionals, healthcare professionals, civic organizations, social organizations. We're still exploring that. The idea is that these sketches that these individuals do, we collect them and scan them. We post them on social media with the hashtag mental health sketch. And but then we're collecting all of these for a future exhibit. The idea that then you'll see this crosscut of sketches that a number of individuals from a wide variety of design backgrounds and practice types and parts of the country and with different lived experiences. So that's the term they use in the UK and other places, with an individual that has been admitted to a facility and has had a lived experience with a mental health issue, perhaps. And then they can kind of see the creativity they have in addressing these specific issues, and which is really great for someone like me because I do this every day for my job. And individuals that have no background in designing these facilities, but they might have a very personal connection with a family member or a friend or even themselves, and see their creativity in creating design solutions that are just so far beyond what you might see in practice. It really energizes me, right, creatively speaking. And then I think a lot of people get a lot out of the experience because it gives them agency around a really difficult topic. Because sketching for designers might be a very familiar processes and task. And then to use that medium to kind of tackle this issue, explore ideas, talk about stigma, their personal experiences, things like that, through this medium of sketching and that process has been really rewarding for me and for them.
So Oh,
I,
Jared.
I was just going to say, I asked that question sort of selfishly, is that, part of where I am in my career right now, is that I'm in an office with, for instance, with no other architects. So, my practice day to day is me as an architect. I have some other, people in my office who are, they're working towards their license and all that. But, but by and large, it's a lot of other professionals who are sort of working within a development and kind of community organizing aspect of work. And we attend a lot of conferences, and we also produce a lot of educational material, for those groups and settings. But it's not architect talking to other architects or architect talking to other design professionals. I mean, we do that to some degree, but it's actually a very small percentage of our work.
Yeah.
And so it just sort of fascinated me was that, and I hadn't thought about this with yours. I had a very, very different angle to talk to you about with your work, but
Sure.
and these sketches in particular. But it's which I'll hopefully get to. But this, I think that there's something there that I would entirely encourage you guys to lean into, because I think that there's something special about our superpower. I mean, for lack of a better term, I mean, that's the way people think about architects and designers, is that we have, and I don't think it's a superpower so much as it's that we're just comfortable trying to do it.
Yeah.
And that comfort is sort of like, there's a scale, it's a sliding scale of comfort, but we recognize that the power of it in our own work, and in the power of communicating via that sketch with someone else. It increases that dialogue. And to hear you describe it in terms of people who either are kind of in the medical architecture kind of field or healthcare architecture kind of field, as well as those who aren't, but maybe have some connection to it, and they're trying to kind of access it through the sketch. That medium is the message kind of thing. Really, becomes really special, and I would be really excited to hear when you guys do this for a group of non-design professionals. And not just what the sketches are, but also sort of what the takeaways end up being for you as well, doing a workshop like that.
No, that's a great point. And when we began this process, we didn't know it would become a evolutionary, it's serial sort of process. We saw that there was such a great positive reaction to it, and we had created or gathered all this material that people were very willing to give us. Right, they were willing to take the time, hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever it was, to do the workshop, do the sketches, and the collaborative nature of that was just very powerful. And other people are like, "Oh, we should do this someplace else." And then we just get invites, and so we've kind of been more of the organic. Where do people sort of invite us, ask us, that kind of thing. The other groups that have sort of reached out to us, we're still in a very embryonic phase of doing this, and we rely on how do I put this? It's our time. Emily and Shahad and the others that participate, it is their onus to go there, travel, pay to travel, spend the time doing it. So it is a labor of love. My practice affords me to do that because it's very well aligned with our sort of value set, if you will. And for me, it's a very much a passion project. And I would be fascinated to see when we do get to that setting where it's non-designers, because we have lots of different designers, right? So I've had facility staff, I've had vendors, I've had folks that are kind of on the periphery of the design industry who aren't designers themselves, for example, who are represented in these sketches, as well as folks that are like, they only do residential or they only do K-12. And they bring very interesting nuances. Like if you do affordable housing, and they talk about the trauma of an individual who formerly experienced homelessness, and like the revelation and release they have on getting a home, and then how they translate in the space. They bring that experience to these sketching episodes like this, or those that do K-12 and a child that is trying to deal with social anxieties. and how that can we be reacted to in space, and how the environment can help them through that. I have these wonderful conversations in these workshops from these different designers doing nowhere near healthcare, nowhere near mental health, and they bring that sort of different experiences here and layer into it. So I would be fascinated when we do get to those settings, and it's either healthcare professionals or folks interested in kind of like social equity or other sort of interested organizations, to see what perspective they bring to it, and the creativity that we find might be completely untapped in this setting, that we kind of give them just the basic tools, the basic medium, the framework to kind of fill in. Because all of these sketches, when we participate in this, we don't label our sketches. No one puts their name on them, or it shouldn't. And the idea is that it's that kind of collective, collaborative nature of it. So even mine in here are unlabeled. So, and I would really put that to the testament in the willingness to share of all the participants, because there's a lot of vulnerability that also goes into the workshop. It's a very difficult introduction, actually. When Shahad tells her story, when I unpack my family story, it's a very difficult subject to hear. It definitely sets a tone for the room. And then we start picking people up with like, this is how we can do better. This is how we can do better together. These are case studies, these are precedents, these are presentations. These are facilities that have strived to do better, and how design can impact you positively in the environment and the design decisions you make, and foster positive engagement, foster socialization, foster the ability to take charge of your space when you don't really have any agency to do so in a very critical time in your life. And then they start sort of, I would not necessarily say clawing their way towards gripping around this really difficult subject, but the sketches sort of start to manifest and like bring out these creative juices and these solutions, and they really change the tempo of the conversation to a much more hopeful and engaging discourse.
Well, I think it's sort of a, well, how do I, so many things that I've been there. Yeah, I know there's so many things I've been thinking about, but yeah, I really appreciate, and I mean Jamie and I both agree, that the use of the tool of the sketch can have so much impact, and we've come across this in 131 or 2 episodes now, in various ways, mostly between, say, Jamie and I, and a lot of Jamie's sketches over those years, and then with special guests, we talk about certain other facets and avenues of how the sketch moves into different arenas, and what the work of you and Shahad and was it Emily?
Yeah,
are doing with this project, and this well, I guess this sort of focus area in practice,
a collective.
Collective work together is fantastic. And the sort of technical question I had is how you've talked about how the visitation center is kind of like the focus of the sketch process, because that's the majority of the space that, say, like the general public has access to. So in comparison, because you are an architect in healthcare, so are these sketches drastically different than how facilities are designed now, and how are they changing the way these facilities are being designed? Because I would assume that the way they have been designed probably don't meet all of the criteria or all of these concepts that are coming out in the sketches. And that's not necessarily the fault of the architect, but it's a process, right? Everything evolves and has a way to adapt and understand and reassess, so we don't wind up continuing down the wrong path and finding the right way to design something. So how's that manifesting, I guess? Or
yeah, I mean, every project that we design and then build is an experiment in itself, right? we take the information we have and the constraints and considerations at that snapshot in time, and then it may evolve some in that time period of design and construction, and then it's built, right? And then you look back at it. Hopefully, you do a post-occupancy evaluation or something with more sort of structure and metrics to it to understand, in this case, like what are the patient outcomes, things of that nature. I find that for these sketches, there's a variety of settings that these might be more appropriate than others. So, in the same way that we have an acuity is a spectrum, right? So if you have a serious mental illness, everything from a forensic psychiatric facility, which is highest acuity, like individuals that cannot be in the public realm due to threats of harm to others or to self, versus a outpatient setting or a low acuity residential setting where someone is like, quote unquote, living there for a certain period of time. They are not allowed to leave. So you lose a lot of freedom in those settings. So you manage risk and design for risk, but we have to harmonize that with creating a therapeutic, non-institutional healing environment. And so I find that these sketches, though, if I were to take this setting, let's say this one in particular in front of me has got a fireplace and a carpet or some sort of rug or whatnot, some things that would be obvious risk for a very specific acuity might not be for a lower one or for a different sort of context, let's say. Let's say the sort of underground courtyard party or section you got there. That's actually not a bad way to go about creating a courtyard. The building is the barrier. The building is not you're not trying to put walls around things. You're trying to use the building to foster this outdoor space that's safe. That's psych safe, as we say sometimes. I may not put trees in that thing at that height because that's a great way to parkour your way out of said courtyard. And if said individual is not supposed to elope, as we call it, and elopement is not just a shotgun wedding, but elopement is just leaving the premises. That to me is a very compelling way because you're using sight and you're using the building and the environment to kind of create a safe space that also has really beautiful attributes to it. Or creating this the seating arrangement that's kind of shown in perspective here around this circular setting. That's actually might be a beautiful way of creating a variety of social settings. So you have choice of where to sit. So for example, when you're in an environment like this where you don't have a lot of say in what you do day to day, what spaces you're in, your day might be very programmed, but you can choose to be with individuals. You can socialize one-on-one or small groups or larger groups or self-reflect. But the idea is that you have voice and choice in where to socialize in the space, or even to seek out different sensory environments. A lot of times you can learn tools about how to self-regulate through your environment. You could seek out specific stimuli or seek to avoid specific stimuli or all stimuli. So the one with the kind of curving, meandering walls out there in the courtyard, you can imagine a variety of tactility there, smooth and rough and things of that nature that, for a child on the spectrum, that could be really soothing and they could find a way to use their environment to self-soothe and self-regulate.
It's a fabulous sketch. I mean, it, the energy of it and the like you said, the kind of the qualities that you're describing, you could pin this up on a screen and I think folks could they could imagine that story themselves of that environment and place some of those qualifiers on it, quite easily without any description. I mean, the sketch we're looking at has no, no words to it. It does have scale figures, which I also love. They look animated, but in a way that, they also sort of feel safe in that environment. There's, those are the types of things that as you're describing them, I'm looking at the sketches trying to kind of, ascertain, okay, how would, what's the story this person is trying to convey? And then as a designer, like, what are the things can I use as takeaways for the work that I might be able to do. And I relate this to a very simple experience when I was in college. My the chair of my master's committee was also the director of our Center for Health Services in the College of Architecture at A&M. And so she had a PhD, was also a licensed architect, was a woman, who was very, very passionate about health systems, post-occupancy evaluations, sketching, maverick architects. I mean, thinking about the process very, very differently, and how that research could really, impact practice. And so what she did was she had brought, and I had her as my master's chair, but I was introduced to her as a junior and took her as an undergraduate design course. And her first exercise that she gave all of her students was an LDRP room. And it was like, you've got, 20, 21-year-olds, in architecture school designing one room for the labor, delivery, recovery, and postpartum process. Mm-hmm. And it was, and for us and we were all kind of trained as generalists. And so it wasn't, we weren't doing like a health certificate or anything like that, but it was that exposure to concepts. And so, and I think that, and having, dialogue amongst our studio, in that kind of a way, it makes me kind of, get excited about what you guys are trying to do with these workshops. Cause I can imagine, not only the stories that sound like, really are impactful in sort of setting the tone for things, but then also the energy that gets generated by this exercise.
And I think that is one reason why we keep wanting to do it, is that the energy that this kind of environment fosters when you sort of put all those elements together, and it's a short amount of time, right? It's not a ton of time, and there's a gratification of the sketch sort of accomplishing that kind of key idea or drivers, like the feeling of being cloistered in this little space right here in this garden because the walls sort of hug you, right? And that's one way that it was described, for example. But also, if you can imagine the playfulness, if this is in a pediatric setting of playing peekaboo with the little like holes in the wall, or curling up in one of the bigger sort of seating niches or something within it, and that there's a playfulness that starts to really change that tone too, because you see that it isn't just about creating a safe environment or looking to mitigate risk or any one individual story. You start to see this kind of collective riffing off of each other too, because they have this partnership between the two folks that are sketching. Sometimes they sketch separately, sometimes they sketch together. And then when we kind of do a crit, we all sort of present. You definitely see people pick up language and excitement around the story they're crafting with the sketch. And they're like, oh, I love this idea. I want to incorporate it here. You can see them like their brains start churning for what they want to take this experience and this knowledge. Because we only have so much time to really kind of talk about projects and case studies that are trying to convey a concept. I love the idea of they sort of make it their own and can riff on it in their own practices. And I love seeing they leave the room with just a very different energy and vibe that's very infectious. And you're like, oh, when's the next time we can do one of these workshops? Because it's really energizing to me. And I get these whole new raft of sketches and I'm like, oh man, there's so much potential out there. And for us to do better together.
I forgot that part, and I'm glad you restated it. The idea of like the you pair people up intentionally, and that they work together and separate. They're sort of brainstorming, but then the activity shared. There's a lot more energy and intensity that can be generated with that sort of guided or shared experience. And I keep in the background I've been continually thinking about in school when I'm teaching in studio and how to sort of generate a similar sense of energy with the students in studio these days, right? Because they really don't, and I'm not knocking this generation, but they don't sketch like we did, and what you're showing us here, and they do a little bit, but it's causing me to think that, like, while your focus area is in this mental health and healthcare arena, this kind of activity, I think, could generate any kind of project type,
Oh yeah,
a much
absolutely.
richer project type of any kind.
Yeah.
Well,
if
and
you
I
did
like,
this sort of
and
exercise.
and along the lines of what you're saying, Kurt, and it's not, I think it's not sort of an ageist or generation discussion. I don't want to get into that. But it's, I think that what's unique about what Stephen and his collaborators have been doing is that they're pairing people up to do this exercise. And so in that pairing, there's a innate vulnerability that everybody has to kind of reconcile, and because of the time, and because of the time frame, just like the coffee sketches that I do, I mean, I'm purposely trying to do them quickly. Some are way better than others, in my opinion, like for me personally, and in others, I'm surprised sometimes when the ones that I do super fast that I'm not too crazy about, people really like.
Yeah.
Okay, what's in that I'm not seeing personally? What's going on in my brain? But I like the idea that you're sort of setting up this collaboration between two people, and I think that may be something, Kurt, for you with your students would be kind of a unique exercise to pull, because even with colleagues of mine that I have in sort of my studio, in a sense, it's the iterative process. It's not the sketching so much. It's like, I don't care if it's a good sketch or a bad sketch or an ugly. I'm not interested in that. I'm not worried about that. I'm interested in, like, are we getting the ideas out there?
Yeah.
And are we working through multiple ones? Are we getting to what you're really trying to say?
Yeah.
And I'm imagining these conversations that people are having where they're getting at the heart of the story, and they're doing it with a sketch, that's super powerful at the end of the day.
There's a lot of layers to it, but because we start off with Shahad's story and kind of our perspectives and our 1 degree of separation, there's vulnerability in that, right? There's a trust in the audience and a trust in ourselves to share those really vulnerable moments in our lives and the moments of our loved ones, and reciprocating, or getting that trust reciprocated in this process, if you will, because you're sharing and you're hoping that others will share in the process, and that together we can kind of take what is the stigma of us preventing us from sharing, from being vulnerable, and overcoming that, right? And that builds the trust, and trust is a two-way street.
Yeah.
And so starting with that vulnerability, and then you can start to iterate because you've built on that trust, right? And that the idea that you have and someone else's idea that you have, you respect where you came from with it. And then you build on it together, hopefully, and riff on it together, hopefully. And that's where the iteration and the sketching. And so some of these sketches might be, you might see multiple iterations on a page. You might just see one after they sort of deliberated about it. You might see 2 sketches from that pair because they each kind of have their own style. And that's really wonderful to me because we only give them enough guide rails, like it's the paper size, here's your pens. We give them colored markers, things of that nature.
Is it a Pilot pen? Are you into the Pilot pens too?
Oh, so my pens, I tend to ask for 2 or 3 different line weight styles, and I always rubber band mine together because nursing staff will take away your pens if you don't keep the cap.
Gotcha. Yep.
So I have a sign pen. So my thick guy, typically.
Oh, I like a sign pen.
A flare pen. This is my medium weight. I will vacillate between a V6, V5, and a Pilot razor point, just depending on because when we asked to set these things up, we were like, I like 3 different weights for folks. who show up without anything, and that's usually the options I get. Those are my personal ones. Obviously, people show up with their own,
Right.
and then like literally just the Crayola thin pens and thin markers we like best instead of the thick markers, because you get more colors to work with. I've seen people sketching all green and all purple and all just monochromatic, and then others who are just using the complete kaleidoscope of colors. And just kind of depends because the patient persona we kind of give them is a woman named Maria who has postpartum depression. Having designed a postpartum or worked on postpartum psychiatric units, um, a lot of what you're trying to get to is about relationships. So we talk about our relationships, like Shahad and her relationship to the environment, my relationship to family. We set up this empathy exercise to talk about the relationship of the patient, this other person, Maria. She obviously had a child, has a partner, a husband, or someone else in that process with them. And so you talk about all these different relationships and how does the space help foster certain relationship dynamics, help create a shared experience. How does this foster empathy for someone that in crisis that you don't really know their exact perspective because their grip on reality might be very different than you or I as well. That could be true of someone with developmental disorders as well as someone who's going through psychosis or withdrawal. And so each person sort of brings those kind of unique viewpoints to it. And that's really awesome to see.
Oh, I imagine.
Yeah. I mean, I think we'll have to have you back on as you build up this catalog, at some point again in the future.
Well, and the other thing too is that I think Steven needs to use his AIA like sway, like sway.
Shui sounds good.
Okay. I don't know where that came from. So like clearly, like I'm not fellow material. Kurt might be fellow material. You, Steven, might be fellow material. But Texas, Texas is weird. But I will say, from a scheduling point of view, it is a damn shame that the urban sketching is at the exact same time at the national conference as your session about design and health, because I would have signed up for both. I would have brought Kurt and I could have done, like, we could have been partners and done a lot of sharing.
That'd be fascinating. I would.
Yes, it would have.
And hey, it doesn't stop you from doing it yourselves. I can't recreate.
That could be an episode. Do you want to be the facilitator for that episode for us?
That'd be great.
Happy to help. Well, that's another thing about it is we kind of create this environment in this kind of moment in time, this event that people can kind of come together and do it. It doesn't mean you can't replicate it in your own way. Like we would love to see it be evolutionary. We don't own any IP for this stuff. Anyone can kind of use the concept to kind of riff on their own. I would love to see anyone evolve it and just get something out of it that helps them either in their practice or in general life experience even. I've had clinicians say the same thing. Like they go to a lot of conferences to learn and keep themselves fresh on the latest medical techniques. But I mean, it's a great way to just take yourself out of your normal processes and hopefully use something that you're familiar with or have fun with, and produce something that kind of makes you think a little bit differently.
Well, I love that, and I love the way you just said that for yours, because hearing about it, I was hoping that's exactly the approach that you were taking. I assumed it. I don't know your collaborators. I assume that's the direction you're going. But like for me, when I've pitched my coffee sketch workshop that I've done 3 times now here in Texas, a lot of folks, sort of initially are like, really, do you want to do like, sketching? And like, how is that? I was like, no. It's everybody can sketch. A lot of people, we're all trained to do it to some degree. A lot of us aren't doing it day to day anymore. But I'll be damn sure if like the people that I've had come to my sketching sessions, some of them are super serious about their sketching. You know, they don't want to hear any like tips, tricks, or anything from me. They're just like they're there to kind of show off a little bit, honestly, probably, or feel like they're in a collective of people who sketch just like them, which is fine. But the thing is that it's the energy of being in a group like that, and giving yourself, kind of giving yourself the gift of you're at a conference. I'm going to give myself 3 hours to go sketch with a bunch of people that I may or may not know, and and explore a little bit and think about things and maybe be exposed to new ideas, new concepts, new techniques, new whatever. And the way, in a very dissimilar way to the way you've described it, but kind of the same idea, trying to get people immediately in that first 5 minutes to know this is going to be a little different, and that's okay. I say, okay, everybody's got their favorite implements. That's awesome. I'm glad you brought them. Great. But for the first 10 minutes, I'm going to make you draw with like charcoal. And here's your charcoal. And so
get out of the comfort zone.
Yeah. Like immediately they're like, whoa. Even the ones who are like the pro, they're like the circuits, you can just see them just like, I'm like, oh, no. Do I have to take that pencil out of your hand?
Yeah. No, I absolutely, because the setting we create, the kind of atmosphere, you're fostering a community, hopefully, right? This shared sense of esprit de corps and camaraderie, because you're sharing, because the beginning story and intro to this is a downer. I'm not gonna lie. It's not going to be rainbows and sunshines and that kind of stuff. It's a difficult topic. It automatically gets people out of most of their comfort zones, and then we start to sort of bring them back on a journey, hopefully. And not to say we don't learn from this and have hopefully gotten better through each iteration, but at the end of it, everyone sort of feels hopefully that sense of community around the sketching and what we're hoping to accomplish individually and collectively, and putting yourself out there and being vulnerable, and using this medium to kind of get agency around a difficult topic. All of that getting out of your comfort zone, and then getting yourself into a new space mentally, into a new comfort zone, hopefully, or stretching yourself to something beyond where you started with.
Yeah, I think, and then it generates the energy or a creativity, right? The stretch. I think that's
the stretch and the friction, right, and the tension. That's where the energy sort of like comes from in a way.
Well,
because the friction between the individuals.
I mean, there should be no gatekeeping on creativity. I mean, that's one thing that Kurt and I, really try and like highlight for the way we both approach it. We bring different energy, obviously, to, but our banter is balancing each other. But what you guys are doing, I applaud. It just sounds fantastic. I'm sorry we weren't able to do it in San Francisco with you. We went around the city and sketched with a bunch of people randomly in the cold. It was fun.
It was a little bit colder than I was expecting.
It was.
And I guess, but no, I mean, we applied again. We'll see how it goes. Like I said, we get invited, and as we had time and wherewithal to do it, we try to do it when we can. And we're definitely looking forward to the next one in Colorado. And like I said, I do many types of workshops. This is one of my favorites. I'm doing, like I mentioned earlier, a mental health mock-up workshop at a healthcare design conference.
Right.
That's leveraging like hands-on analog mock-ups with AI to imagine, better mental health environments. So no matter your medium, whether it's the two-dimensional or the three-dimensional or the digital or the charcoal, there's ways to sort of stretch your creativity and kind of address really big issues along the way.
Yeah, thanks. I think we'll let you go with that one, and we're excited to follow up on that upcoming conference through your social media. So I hope to see some sketches from Colorado. And even
I need to
that AI,
release. I need to release some from Aspire already, actually. So it's a good push in the pants.
trust me, there's no judgment on getting things out on a timely fashion from this guy. So
A podcaster, that sounds about right.
all right. All right. Thanks.
Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you. Take care.